fuss about it in the media. And so you have this situation where the government can't criticise the judges, but MPs can. But MPs who are a member of the government can't. And that's the real challenge, because what we do in this country to get change often is people go and say there's a big problem, they go to the MPs who write to the minister and ask the minister to change it. And in this instance, the ministers can't, because they can't look at the individual cases and come to their own conclusions. And even if they take a very superficial view, as like Tim Lawton does, everything's perfect, there's no problems, right? They're actually not, by the way the Constitution works, they're bound to follow what the judges say. One of the reasons I want to remain a backbench member of Parliament is it stops me from being prevented from speaking out.
You mustn't become a minister.
Yeah, exactly. So if I became Minister for the Family Courts, I wouldn't be able to criticise the way the courts were. Right? So the issues about, the judges basically being tolerant of secret evidence. And one of the problems is everyone always thinks, well, let's write to a minister and let's deal with that. It doesn't solve it. And to solve it, in a sense, we need to highlight the problem such that Parliament acts, because Parliament has the power. Parliament, under Article 3.7 of the 1701 Act of Settlement, can actually remove judges. Right? So Parliament can, for instance, so it's only happened 2 or 3 times in the history of the UK since that Act was brought into power. So Parliament controls the judges, but normally, and rightly so, Parliament doesn't look at individual cases. That doesn't mean Parliament can't look at individual cases. Parliament can look at individual cases. But it needs to have a demand to look at the individual cases. Now, if you look at what the Education Select Committee has been doing recently, has anyone watched the video of me providing evidence to?
We were there, we were there.
Yeah, you were there, I know. Has anyone seen that? Basically, that was looking at individual cases a little bit,
yes.
Right? And what I think we need is a parliamentary inquiry into secret expert evidence.
Can I just follow up on the Education Committee? Because because it specifically said in the remit, we must not deal with individual cases.
They normally don't deal with individual cases.
I therefore put in an overview, a general submission. And then I got sufficiently inspired, because I had one more case after another, I put together 9 individual anonymized cases. And I've asked them recently, where are they with the report? Because I didn't get a response to an email, so I telephoned, what are the plans? Oh, well, kind of nothing. And I would love to know what is going to happen.
Again, I can find out by having a word as to what's going on. Because obviously the plan is to produce a report, but I don't know.
They haven't told me that it's
yes, but
isn't planned or scheduled at least.
They are working on it, obviously. But coming back to the point, what Parliament actually needs to do is look at the secret evidence, the expert evidence, because it's so unreliable. There are good psychologists out there, but a lot of it's been complete rubbish.
Has the Channel 4 producer?
Channel 4 are waiting until the Family Justice Review come out with their report into expert evidence, and they intend time. Channel 4 are working on two programs. One to do with a name psychologist, which I won't name, and another one to do with the general issue of expert evidence. They do seem to have recognised, as far as I can tell, that there is a serious problem with unreliable expert evidence in the family courts. I think they've recognised that. And obviously, if we get these things talked about in the media, that actually has an effect on Parliament. So, once there is sufficient demand from outside Parliament for a parliamentary inquiry into secret evidence, Parliament will act. But you need to actually get that demand from outside Parliament.
I see.
If you go about it in the traditional way of trying to get the government to do it, nothing will happen. Because the government's not allowed to do it.
Well, we went to see Camilla Cavendish yesterday as well, and because I was mainly surprised about the fact that her 10-point plan hasn't been implemented.
Yeah.
And to get an independent board to control social services, for example, seems to be a very good idea. Can you do anything along that line?
Well, again, we have to get the problem is that the judiciary are not doing their job properly. That's the underlying problem, and that is because the judiciary is supposed to be there to actually act impartially, not to just keep things going. On lots of local areas, they're just people's friends, and they just go with the flow all the time. And that, you see it all happen. It's not exactly new to you all. And the difficulty is they're not doing their job properly. And the appellate structure therefore doesn't work properly either. And unless that is what you actually need to do. Now, my own view is you need, for care proceedings particularly, probably for private law proceedings, you need to operate more on the basis of a case conference, an independent case conference, not one chaired by another employee of the council, but somebody who's really independent, who chairs a case conference, and they come to conclusions through that route rather than that. If you get sufficient independent people on that, it effectively acts similar to a jury. But it needs to work through that process.
Okay, well, so we've covered the questions,
Yeah.
and then one of the political tools that I've always liked, that is working with Austin, and I see you're a hero in tabling EDMs as well, are those drafts that have been proposed for early day motions.
Let's understand a few things. An early day motion is a motion tabled to be debated on an early day. Right? As in, it's tabled.
Which never happens.
Well, no, it can happen. And what they're useful for is to give some indication of who supports the issue.
Exactly.
Right? But actually what we need to do is establish a parliamentary inquiry, establish a committee to look at the failings of the system. Right? Specifically looking at individual cases as well. That's a difficult thing to do.
Why?
Because it hasn't been done for a long time. If you look at the parliamentary records going back 100, 200 years, Parliament used to establish committees of inquiry. It hasn't been doing that more recently. Partly because what happened in the 1880s, I know it's a long time ago, but what happened in the 1880s is the independent Irish MPs disrupted Parliament, so government was given control over the parliamentary agenda. Now that was changed at the start of this Parliament, and time was given, control over time was given, not all time, but some parliamentary time, was given to the Backbench Business Committee. Right? So it's then possible to table a motion via the Backbench Business Committee to establish an inquiry. But that requires external pressure from outside Parliament for that to happen.
So once again, back to the media. I'm afraid Sue Reid has not shown up so far.
Has Sue been invited? Yeah.
Yes, she said.
Sue's very good. No, Sue is a very good journalist.
She wanted
She
to
really
come,
is.
of
No,
course,
but obviously everyone has pressures on their time.
Yes.
You know, Sue is a very good journalist. Because she feels so strongly on this issue, they haven't really allowed her to write as many stories she would like to write for the Daily Mail because she feels so strongly on the issue. If you look at what Christopher Booker's been doing, he's been very good. Ted Geary's been very good. All right, Ted's working on some of the stories at the moment. But people have pressures on their time.
But do you think we should feed these journalists with more stories?
I think what is needed is to highlight some of the more extreme things. It's actually the systemic aspects of it that need the attention. Because one bad apple is one argument, but you actually need a systemic look at it. And
so the overview submission to the...
Well, it's getting the evidence together that is critical with all of these things. We talk about Robert Green's thing, right? Robert Green has been jailed for a year for campaigning in the general election of Aberdeen South. Now, what I don't know, for instance, relating to his case, is what were the court orders, the interdicts, that he wasn't served with. I've never seen copies of them.
Belinda, you would know, wouldn't you?
Yes, the interdicts were against
yes, but I've not seen copies.
Names or served at an inappropriate time.
I accept that they weren't served on him, but I haven't ever seen a copy of them. I've made a number of them.
Copy on my file, so
Well, that'd be good if you can send me a copy of it. See, that case, if you put aside the issue to do with Holly Green, because there's some of the allegations that are made, like Alex Salmon's involved in this, that, and the other, are clearly nonsense, right? But there are questions about the underlying case as to what's happened there. I've not had enough evidence. I spoke to Robert Green when he came to Parliament about this, but nobody's ever provided me with the documentary evidence that I need.
Well, I can provide you with almost all that you need.
That's good.
And now you've asked for it, I will.
But the difficulty is knowing who's dealing with what, because you get lots of people who...
Because now Robert has been put away.
I know, exactly. So, but you see, if you imagine, why has there been very little press about Robert Green? It's a good question to ask. In part, because
in Scotland there have been 86 articles, because the Scottish Sun actually gave me this figure that it's been covered 86 times throughout Scotland, mostly, but here and now.
Yeah, but in part, the reason why there's not been that much coverage is because because some of the claims are too extreme, and they're clearly wrong, right? Some of the claims are quite serious, and potentially true, and some of the claims that are made are clearly wrong, because in practice, people who are Prime Ministers or First Ministers of Scotland don't have the time, they don't see the letters written to them, they're all passed by civil servants, and they almost certainly, if you get a letter, it's not signed by them, right? Because you don't get that sort of attention, purely because of the volume of things going on. So if somebody writes to David Cameron here, you don't get a response from him, do you? You don't. And so to think that he's aware of something just because somebody's written letters to him, it's a nonsense. He won't know. So all of these things are a question of getting the evidence to prove to the outside world that there's a serious problem, and then for that, the outside world to say to Parliament, well, what are you doing about it? And then there are a lot of MPs who are unhappy about the situation. All right? So, you know, problems within the different parts of the system. But it needs to crystallise. Now, I have the advantage of being on a number of select committees. One is the Procedure Select Committee. Another one is the Backbench Business Committee. And it means I know how to progress things through the parliamentary process. But actually, it needs a demand from outside Parliament.
Well, that's why we're here.
Oh, I accept that you're here.
We have to know how we can support you.
Yes.
And
Well,
how we can help
what it is to be able to prove something, I need Belinda's going. If she gets me the stuff, that'll be very good. I don't mind meeting you and Belinda from time. We have met from time to time. But again, I'm working on similar projects. It's the same sort of thing. I'm working on it in my own way. So I went off to Berlin to talk about secrecy and freedom of expression and the failures. You know, the fact that secrecy protects the powerful. One of the stories that hasn't got out is about a case